Welcome to this conversation and presentations on family, which is, I think, one of the most important things we should be talking about. You are in for a treat. 3 wonderful women going to speak to you today through different lenses. Charleen, Katra is going from the National Catholic Partnership on Disability, is going to talk about family through this lens of families with children or youth with special needs. Denise is second, right? Denise Utter is a coach and a consultant and personal mentor of mine, and she's going to use this lens of listening. And then Carla Ferrando-Bowling is the third presenter, and she's going to go through the lens of cultural diversity and those contexts.
All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to the family, right? That's what I was saying outside with the people who are coming in. Welcome to the family. Before I start, I'm going to read you what I just saw posted on a wall, because I was like, church. You know, it was like church out there. Okay, here's their values and guiding principles. Underlined 2 words that I say often: people first, okay? And underneath people first, the 4 bullet points: be of service, listen and respond with compassion, create a safe space for all, your well-being is important to our mission. I was like, well, shoot. I like these people. Very nice, very nice. But anyway, our office, NCPD, the National Catholic Partnership on Disability, this year has really been focusing on this tagline, making parishes everyone's home. That's why I'm going to lean into that title today, because that is our goal, right? It's not just the disability lens, it's all of our lenses. So we start with, of course, one small sentence or quote out of the directory, catechetical directory, on the importance of all of us, catechists, leadership, clergy, bishops, keeping families of persons with disabilities close to our hearts, accompanying them, fostering their full, and I'll say meaningful participation and incorporation into the ecclesial community, right? So what we talk about at our office a lot is a culture of belonging. And for faith formation and family faith formation, as you can see by the bullet points, it has to be individualized. Even with a disability or a diagnosis, everyone, person to person, is going to manifest itself in various forms and fashions. It's not a one-size fits all. Obviously, in this course, especially in this session, we're focusing specifically on a family perspective. And of course, I say that intentionality, if you think along the lines of universal design, you're more likely to do what universal design does best. And what it does best is it removes barriers, right? We have buildings that are old structures across the US, and I say every denomination has old buildings because we're a 100-year-old country. So more often than not, we have these kind of barriers in our buildings, physical barriers. They can be resolved. We can get grant monies. We can get, resources from within the parish. I've seen that where if you put your needs out, they'll come build the ramp, they'll renovate a restroom, etc. Might cost some money, some sweat equity, but we can get there. The other barrier we often have, though, right, are attitudinal barriers. Interestingly, though, attitudinal barriers don't cost anything to remove, but yet they are the hardest to remove, even in good Catholic Christian communities. So, we talked yesterday about conversion and the need, and the whole really focus needs to be on conversion. I have always said, every parish wants that for their community. I believe if you get people with disabilities and their families involved in the full life of the faith community, God uses them to touch hearts and create conversion. I once had a parent tell me that her young adult son who had autism asked her, "Why did God make me this way?" I'm sure many parents have maybe been asked by their child that question. I thought her answer was very succinct, very spot on and correct. She just simply told him, God made you this way, the way he made you, to teach others about him. I thought that was, again, just spot on, right? If you ever read the book Adam, God's Beloved, a very short read. It was the last book Henry Nouwen wrote, where he lived in a large community and cared for a young man named Adam, a young adult named Adam, who had multiple and severe disabilities. Henry Nouwen, scripture scholar, theologian extraordinaire, international sought-after speaker, right, said in that book he learned more about the incarnation working with Adam than he ever did in all the theology and formation he had in his lifetime. Closed book, right? It was just like, wow. So we can't move forward if we don't look at what the barriers are. And sometimes we can see the barriers, but guess what? Sometimes those barriers can be invisible. We don't even recognize them quite what they are. So it's important that we take time. This was a tool our office made a few years ago, a little small resource. It's on our exhibit table. We lovingly call it the LAM, of course. It stands for Language, Accessibility, Meaningful Participation, and Belonging. It's a tool that a parish or a diocese can take to really take a checklist type of assessment across their campus, both physical barriers and attitudinal barriers. What it helps people do is see not only what barriers exist, it also, so you can see too what your strengths are, what you got right going on, but it also shows you where your gaps are and maybe some weaknesses you have that you can do a little more work on and advance further in one area or the other. This is Temple Grandin. She's probably, some of you know her, see her picture, the most well-known, and I'd say early on, international self-advocates for someone with autism. So, but when she was very young, you can see a quote by her, some comments she's made. That one struck me there, especially as an educator the first time I read it, right? She's not gonna read a book. Everybody learns, I always say every brain is different. I think that's a good thing. Her brain is wired such that reading, so text-heavy books, are not gonna be where she's gonna lean into. That's not her learning style. Just the fact that her brain is like Google Images is an image in itself. You know what that vast cavern is like when you go look up a Google image. But just that statistic, and that changed again this spring. When I started in this ministry decades ago, I think it was around 1 in 60 approximately, and then just not that much at the time. We're down to 1 in 32. I mean, it's amazing the rise of the diagnosis. Two things, autism and mental illness. Those two we really can't do training fast enough on. And this is where I say, in a sense, sometimes is when we talk about serving families and doing family catechesis. Families today, and even more so into the next decades coming, are not going to look like the families of yore. They're not going to look quite the same. They're not going to be learning quite the same. The rise in autism, you don't outgrow that, right? You're going to become an adult. You're going to be a parent who has and lives with autism. These are already realities in our churches. I talk to priests about the people in front of them. I talk to leadership about the people in adult faith formation classes. I've been in them. I've taught them where you've got someone who has autism in the class, a participant. Now, when I hear that, I smile inside because it's like, yay, there's someone with autism in this class. So I find that very encouraging, but for some, that's quite a challenge. The one man I'm thinking of in particular, when it happened most recently, he was very smart and knew his theology. But what he didn't know was how to broker how much time to take up in asking questions in a group of people this size in a 2-hour window or something. So you have to give them a boundary. You can say you can ask 3 questions tonight or during this session. They just need the boundaries. If you give them the boundaries, they're good. But otherwise they wouldn't be able to kind of figure that out on their own like someone else might, as far as brokering time across with other people. So a few more stats, just so you see kind of the changing dynamics of who's in front of us, from younger people to older people, and especially when we're talking about, in this case, family catechesis and trying to teach this whole family, whatever model you're using, whether at the parish or part home, all home. And often in this case, it may be more in the home just because our families are more isolated, sometimes not as easily able to jump in cars and get to parishes as often as maybe another family might, especially if they have people in wheelchairs. But just these stats, 1 in 6 with developmental disabilities, 1 in 6 with sensory processing challenges, right? I cut the bank of lights. Now, This would be an absolutely perfect idea to do in a room that might serve someone who that light is just too bright for them, those fluorescents. Other than maybe making some of us sleepy, it really is no harm, no foul. And honestly, it might benefit, it's usually what's good for one person benefits other people. So whether it's, me talking quieter, the lights being dimmer, anything like that that you can do to cut some of the sensory input. Most of us, when your brain's working effectively, can break out all those different outside interferences. But when your brain's not working effectively or efficiently, it's all coming at you at once, and you can't separate it. And if someone doesn't watch and see that you need some help, or you need a fidget, or you need something to break that overload, sensory overload, you're going to end up with someone in a meltdown. And you want to try and be proactive and stop that before it happens, right? And again, I go to this one. Most curricula, right, are very text heavy, number one. So we already talked about the fact that that's not going to be best for some of our learners in this community. So they're going to be text heavy, so very knowledge based. All good, typically, we need that. But we really need to be much more affective to be effective with some of our learners. We're talking about learners oftenly, and I say children of God, all ages. So chronological age could be 35 or 5, but whatever that age is, child of God, they're going to need visuals. They're going to need experiential lessons. We talk about object lessons often, really using manipulatives that relate to that lesson so they can really hands-on, tactile, kinesthetic style learning and visual learning. And I put the picture of a parent and a child over here on the other side just to say, please know that, again, as I said about those people with diagnoses and the statistics now, they grow up, they're going to be your parents. They may be us, they may be our friends and family and relatives as well, very commonly. Just to raise a hand, how many people already know and love someone with a disability? Folks, I don't know if almost every hand in this room went up. This is very typical in 2025. When I started years ago, you might have got 5 or 10 hands go up in the large group. I have watched the wave go across like that, right? So all I'm saying is sometimes that parent may have a diagnosis or a disability too. Or they may have, but never been diagnosed. So there may be some learning differences or struggles or weaknesses. And again, we all have disabilities, we all have weaknesses, and we all have strengths, if we want to say it that way. But some folks, and especially adults, they may end up, understandably, like any of us, naturally going into a workforce or a work life that promotes their strengths. Of course, you're not going to go where you promote your weaknesses, or you would not be successful. But as an adult, especially undiagnosed, you may actually have learned how to you've learned coping skills, or sometimes they talk about masking. You learned how to put on some kind of mask to get through the day. And through the day might mean going to church. That is not uncommon either. I know many people that will, I heard one pastor tell me once, he had someone tell him it took her 2 or 3 days to get ready to go to church, to go to mass. I was like, what? I'm thinking like get dressed. No, it was emotionally, psychologically, preparing to be in a room with other people, let alone a lot of other people. And then you get everybody wearing their scents and smells, their colognes and their bath wash, whatever it is. All these things can be they strongly impact some people. We might take it for granted because it's not an issue for us. But we just have to be sensitive to all of those things, even especially when you're gathering families and parishes, And so if you can have a no cologne or no perfume free zone. And maybe that's just for allergies because there's invisible disabilities. So you can't see an allergy, can't see those things. So if you just, universal design is, again, removing barriers. The more you remove, the better everybody's going to probably be better served. So be aware of the families, both the child and the parent who might have some learning disabilities or differences. So what can we do to help? I think there's a lot of things. I think we have to get outside the curricula. Okay, we have this book. The bishops say we need to use this book. We know these things to be true. So we have a plan. We have a resource. But honestly, with this community, and again, as I say, what's good for somebody is probably good for many other people. We need to expand on that. We need to give them other avenues to learn that content that are more, again, engaging, multisensory approach that enhances whatever that lesson is. Obviously, videos are fine. Podcasts are so popular these days. And to me, that's a very nice one too, because you can, you can be having family catechesis in your car while you're traveling, which many families do. So, it's not just a moment in time at the parish or at home, right? It's hopefully just kind of woven in and out your lives and your days. I know that's the way it was in my childhood. So between different kind of books that might be leveled more appropriate, just giving ideas and activities to the parents that they might not otherwise know on their own. A couple little adages just to be aware of that we live in this world. Someone might need twice as much time to do half as much work. So if everybody has to do, you want everybody to answer 4 questions, maybe you're only asking for that someone else to do 2. Or instead, if you're going to give everybody 10 minutes, otherwise you can carve it the other way and give this family or this group 20 minutes. And just know that one way or the other. And then just extra space to walk around the room, like our friend was talking about. And I usually, when I teach all day long sessions, I start with, you have permission to move. Movement is good for the brain, number one, so we want to move. And some people really need to do that. They need to do that to be able to focus. So for those who are concerned that, they're not paying attention to me, or no, because honestly, even if they don't speak out loud like I do, if they could, they would give you back verbatim what you said, more so than the person that gave you direct eye contact the whole time you taught, right? So always presume competence, not otherwise, and you're doing better. Just some other helpful tips, a little gathering of some there. Sensory, like I said, engage all 5 senses. When you're doing lesson plannings and you're teaching other people to do lesson plannings, please think about the 5 senses. If someone's blind, would they get something out of the lesson? If someone can't hear, would they get something out of the lesson? We who have these senses, hopefully working mostly well, until as we age and we start losing some of those abilities, right? Might take them for granted and not realize what struggles others are having, especially in a learning and an academic mode, right? So blended learning using technology, hands-on materials, obviously smaller, shorter lessons, movement, transitions, object lessons, we've talked about that. And all of these things are good tips. So parents are happy to work with their children, but guess what? They, like I said, if they also are struggling with ADHD or autism or any other diagnosis, they might need that checklist too, be given them. And maybe the list is just, these are tips. Parents love their children, they know their child better than we know their child, no doubt, but not every parent knows how to effectively teach their child, right? Not every parent has an education degree, or let alone a special education degree. If by the grace of God, they ended up by either birth or adoption with a child with a disability, right? A more diverse learner. So we always want to be their ally. So we want to give them the tips and tools they need to set themselves and their families up for success in the faith. And again, if a lesson mentions something about tools, let them know it's okay to bring a hammer or a screwdriver to the table while they're talking about the lesson. The more the child can see an item, the better. Because we are trying to teach often abstract concepts to concrete thinkers, right? So they need that. Our office, this really was right after the pandemic, we started doing once a month, and you can see it on our website, adapted faith formation activities. We have them available in English and Spanish. I think at least we went through the whole year during the year of the pandemic. So there's this one's coming up, is just for the Holy Family, of course. But it's a whole, 20 pages of just activities and things at that time, and still, it was either a catechist could take this information and use it to teach a lesson, that was very helpful and adapted for this community, or whether in person or on Zoom, or a family could just use it for family catechesis at home as well. So already designed by us for their benefit. We still continue to do these now with the liturgical themes specifically, but we're doing them now for the Catholic University of America. So they have it on their website, which office it's under, but one of the theology offices. So again, there's resources now that we didn't have in the past, and obviously training available. So again, we're here for you if you need us. Going back to the synods, we talked a lot about that this week, as we should and continue to. The most common desire named, all right, by the consultations was to be a more welcoming church, where all members of the people of God can find accompaniment on the journey. You have to get to know someone to be able to accompany them, right? So when Pope Francis announced that the Synod on Synodality was going to be extended, he said he made the decision in order to have a more relaxed period of discernment. He said the fruits of the synodal process underway are many, but so that they might come to full maturity, I highlighted it, it is necessary not to be in a rush. Love that, because I always say, people with disabilities call us to slow down. And more often than not, we need that more than we probably know or realize. You know, I was saying earlier, exhaustion is not a sign of spirituality, right? So, I mean, we've got to move beyond just doing, and offer that ministry of presence to people, all people. And I'm not been a fan, I've written against it, and I don't tell other people how to identify, especially parents and families. I'm not a fan of the term special needs. What I usually lean into is greater needs. So if someone has greater needs than I do, because your needs are special to you, yours are special to you, mine are special to me. I mean, we're all special, so our needs are special. That doesn't quite give it to me, and to me it's a euphemism. But it's very helpful in groups with parents in particular, and I can appreciate, and you probably can too, why. Because as I had someone just tell me recently, parents don't tell us. They don't tell us when their child has a disability or diagnosis. Well, again, you can kind of guess and imagine why. A lot of reasons. They don't want their child labeled. Maybe, again, big D, and I don't mean Dallas, maybe they're in denial still about this child that has a difference, that it wasn't what wasn't what they expected when they had a child, or maybe even adopted a child. So, and that sheet of denial can break, and they're there, and they embrace the child they have fully, or that sheet of ice or denial might break, and guess what, there might be another sheet, and maybe another sheet. So it's a process. It's going to be different for everyone. As we started out saying by the directory, be very pastoral to the families who have kids with disabilities and children of all ages. I say on any given day, I often say I think they're physically, emotionally, financially, and possibly spiritually bankrupt, right? They have a lot more on their plate than most of us have, and some of you might need some of those families as well. So going back to just this last visual for us to focus on for a moment of the Good Samaritan, when we have the time and the ability and the opportunity to meet a need for someone that is maybe greater than ours, obviously that's what we want to do. But I also say, at any given time, and the adage in this world, my world is, we're one car accident away from rolling in a wheelchair, any one of us, right? We have no guarantee for our health later today or any time. So we could be any one of these people at any time, right? And as well as the people flying by on the horses in the background, right? There are, budgets are real, schedules are real, and there are times when you can't stop and be that person and offer that service you'd like to offer to someone else. But you entrust them to God, and that God will put other people in their lives to meet that need at that moment. So I'll leave you with that, and just the fact that, again, it's always about relationships, and from belonging, from inclusion, which is what we used to talk a lot about, and we still do. I'll lastly say, we go from inclusion to belonging. And belonging is very different, because belonging is, you can invite me to your house or to this conference or to church, and I can come and go and never feel like I belong. It's a very different feeling than just being included or even invited and welcomed. So if I come and I feel like I belong somewhere, how and why does that normally happen? What would be the difference between being included and going somewhere and or belonging, feeling a sense of belonging?
Your value.
Your what?
Your value.
Your value, very much so. You are valued. You are seen, you are heard, you're made visible. I once heard someone say you can listen someone into existence, Denise is gonna follow up next, talking a lot about listening. You can listen someone into existence. But I will tell you today, from all the years of talking about inclusion, and now NCPD, we promote and we speak a lot about belonging is different. We've got to get to a sense of belonging. People feel like they belong in their parish homes. Because that means I've made connections, I have relationships, people miss me if I'm not there, and people know me. It's like the old Cheers, wherever you want to go, everybody knows your name, if you're old enough to know the Cheers, old Cheers show. But really, those two things are very good, but they point to one bigger thing. Inclusion and belonging are important, but they're not the end. The end is, and what they point to is communion. So as church, in 2025, I say, we need to speak about being in communion. So we were built and born for communion, being in community, and of course in church as in communion in the Eucharist as well.
Working? Yes. My name is Denise Utter. I have worked in parish ministry, diocesan ministry, and now with primarily nonprofit faith-based agencies like NCCL, Vibrant Faith, some independent work with parishes and dioceses. And it has been a privilege for me through the years to do that kind of listening and to hear people's stories, parents, catechetical leaders. But I didn't always know how to do that. So we're going to go into this first thing, listening to them, how churches are listening, what we're learning, and how listening changes everything. And then, so what? What does that mean for you? The invitation. So I have known since my parish ministry days that listening is important. But my initial gut response to being called to listen was, what? Wait a minute, what? Because when I went into ministry, I had stepped into the office of my pastor, this bald guy, a Midwest Augustinian there up in the middle, Father Don Lewandowski, to talk about a teaching job that I heard was going to be open the next year. I had been a teacher of students with special needs, identified with behavioral issues, emotional issues, but I had also been certified English. My kids were now in school, and I thought, perfect, the English teacher is retiring. I'll have my kid one more year in the parish school, but so I wanted to see, if she was retiring, if he'd be okay if my kid was still there. It was junior high English. And I walked in with my resume, and I'm sharing and I'm talking, so I'm getting nervous. And all of a sudden he just paused. So I paused. And he said, I have something entirely different in mind for you. At which point he talked about this change. They were making a shift towards family faith formation. And he said, I've seen you on committees be a bridge. We're going to need a bridge. We need somebody to help people see. I see that you've worked in education. You get family dynamics. And in that initial meeting, I told him every reason he shouldn't hire me. And then we went on to me going home, my husband asking if that teaching job was available, me saying I have no idea because we never got to that conversation, and telling him what the pastor had said. He said, I think you need to go sit in your prayer chair. We've been thinking about what's next. So I did. My biggest fear, I told the pastor, was being part of a transition, a change, where I didn't have a background in this, education, yes. He said, are you willing to do the training? Yes, absolutely. Okay, surround yourself with people who have the gifts you don't have. Okay, I can do that. And then as we began this, when you first start change in a community, there's a little resistance. I did my time in CCB. And so my initial response was to avoid the confrontation. And my pastor said, no, we're going to hear every single person that's resistant to this. We had a board meeting where one of the moms had wanted to be there and present her letter to us. And she brought 30 of her best friends. And the president of the board was like, no, Michelle signed up to have this conversation. My pastor said, no, we're going to hear them all. And he taught me to call people into my office and have a cup of coffee and hear every complaint and hear what those needs were so that we could respond better, so that we could make the program better. That was not an easy lesson for somebody who had been a youth minister and a teacher, and people were primarily nice and not confrontational. But it was a lesson I needed to learn. I thought then that the listening was preliminary. We do that listening, and then we go do what we were going to do. And maybe they help us to make something better, by that listening, but I didn't realize what we're learning in all the Lilly Grant projects right now, with NCCL, with Vibrant Faith, is that listening isn't just preliminary, it's actually foundational. Listen and then respond to what you've heard. So in our grant projects, as people are listening, when we get onto the vision and design, we're saying, think about what you're planning. Is that responding to what you've heard, to the needs that you've heard in the community? We heard the last couple of days about synod and synodality, synodal listening. Pope Leo says it's an attitude, an openness, a willingness to understand. There are many ways that we can respect one another and have dialogue. He says to bring people together and to understand that relationship, that interaction, that creating opportunities of encounter is an important dimension of how we live our life in church. So often we kind of create, not that any of you do this now, but I know in parish we did this 20 some years ago when I started, that there's an us and them with parents. Like, I had catechists who said, yeah, but the parents don't know. They can't teach. They don't know the faith. I had a catechist who said, I know I'm the only person in this child's life who shares faith with them. And I had to say, are we okay with that? Or wouldn't we rather surround him with community so that there are others sharing faith, so that when you're not there? And I share with catechetical leaders when doing presentations this little circle with a little slice that's like a time, like the hand going to noon. It's a very thin slice. And say, if you have 30 hours of formation in your program, like a lot of dioceses, and if that child is there for all 30 hours and on task and listening and engaging for every minute of every one of those 30 hours, you have 3 1,000ths influence over the time in that child's year. 0.003. 3 1,000ths of their time that they have in a whole year. If you partner with their families, with their parents, that goes up exponentially. And that is how they need to feel accompanied. Last night, our podcasters, Zach and Ashley, talked about the work of Ryan Burge, B-U-R-G. And if you're not following that, he's got some great stuff. Check out the kind of graphics that he includes on listening and faith and belief. But also, you know, as we're talking about listening, Dr. Joshua Packard and Megan Bissell started this organization, futureoffaith.org, and they have a new national research study that they've done with a bunch of partners called Sacred Listening Study. These are just a couple of the snippets. These are US teenagers last year. 8 in 10 agree that listening was important in the moments that shaped their faith the most. Adults 22 to 55, 65% being listened to has deepened my own faith. 76% of adults 22 to 55 asking reflective questions about how faith relates to life challenges is a top thing listeners can do to encourage someone to integrate faith into their daily life. Again, like last night, life to faith to life. And I won't read all of this, but listening's not just a tool, it is formation. Listening is formation. 3 out of 4 agree that being listened to helps them process their spiritual challenges. That's for all of us. That's for young people, that's for adults. So how are churches doing listening now? We'll talk about these different processes, but in the grant work that we're doing, that's okay. And you'll have these available to you every presentation. We'll have them online. But in all the grant work that I'm doing, every single one is starting with listening. The parishes in our NCCL, I have a couple of my dioceses here, we started with surveys. Our diocesan leaders supported the parish leaders that put these surveys out in the entire parish. In our Forest Soil, we started with survey, but then dinner parties. So we'll go into a few of those. All of the listening that we've done, John Roberto has made available on our website. NCCLCatholicFamilies.org. You can go to Family Summit and the CARE report, the report that they partnered with and that the parishes then did. We have, I forget how many, but there's many, many, many families surveyed. It has the profile of the parents, the parenting view of their own parenting, how they're doing. Family faith, what that looks like for them. Parent perception of children's enthusiasm being Catholic. And we actually got information from them, if that child is if they're enthusiastic about being Catholic, what are the practices in the family that have helped that happen? And then parents and faith practices. So if you've ever done any work with John, you know there's going to be a survey. Like, he likes that information. I lean, it always gives you good information, I lean towards the narrative. If you combine both, you can get the best, and that's what he's doing with NCCL. Our next step in the NCCL grant was to have parent cafes. Each leader invited parents into the parish and had roundtables, up to 8 people in each, and began these discussions. A facilitator at the front, one of the parents or somebody you brought in, could be the recorders at the tables. It was very simple: record, give back what you've heard. The questions were simple. And they would start, gather, facilitate, ask 2 questions, let them talk, bring it back to large group, send it back to the small groups for 2 more questions, back, and that's it. First of all, what are the most important values you want to instill in your children? How do you do this? What are some of the things you do as a family to live your faith in everyday life? What is one way the church can support you as a parent? What is one way the church can help your family practice faith? In the work that I'm doing independently with churches and dioceses, we have a 3-year process, and the first year is entirely listening, focus groups, interviews. We go around with parents, pastoral council, women's ministry, men's ministry, and so on, asking them, and I just heard a group, but I don't know if you heard, but why are you in this parish? What brought you here? Why do you stay? What do you wish the parish did for you? Before we ever get into the questions about parenting or about how can the church accompany, just getting them to talk about their faith life here. Why are they here? And so the one-on-ones are very flexible. I want to go back to this for a minute because I didn't say. How to run these parent cafes, John is sharing this as well on NCCL website. Download the session file so that you can see how to do it, the work of the facilitator, the questions, and how the descriptions of what the parish leader needs to do, outlining the project goals, etc. It's all there available for you. One-on-one interviews are very simple. You pick a few questions, and it could be from those questions there. It could be from the questions I'll share with you in a little bit. It could be questions your own team comes up with together. One-on-one you can do at a coffee shop, in your office, buy them a cup of coffee. It could be virtually. And then just listen. Just listen. My favorite is focus groups. I'm working with a pastor in Indiana. We started the first year of listening, and then most of the way through the year he inherited another parish. And so we started listening there. And the first thing that we did was bring some parents around a table, probably about 8 parents in each session, and ask a question. And you have them go around and answer it without anybody else talking. But as you hear them tell their stories, there's this wave throughout of, like they're hearing the stories of one another. It was also a choir that caught me as a young person, or it was my grandmother's faith, and they're listening to one another. And then you ask them how the church can accompany you. At Vibrant Faith, we started with every parish, and these were Catholic and Protestant churches, and a non-denominational church, dinner parties. Invite up to 20 parents in, go to a restaurant, and ask them. There were some pre-dinner questions during dinner, and then after dinner. And there was a lot of that. I thought I was the only one. I had a woman in here earlier who is one of the parishes that's in that project. And at her dinner party, there was a mom whose sister had passed away, and she is raising her niece. And her niece has special needs. And she has her own children and this niece. And so as they got to some of the questions that came out, and there was a gentleman who had the same experience, lost a sibling. raising his nephew. And all of a sudden they were like, I thought I was the only one. I have somebody else I can walk this journey with. And we asked them about the biggest influences in their own faith maturity. How do they see parenting as a calling? How does how God calls them as mom or a dad change how they parent? I will know I've been a successful parent if that was anywhere from, if my child is happy and living out their vocation, if they realize their purpose, if they know God and love God too, if they stay out of jail, like those questions where they were so honest and authentic in their responses. In what ways do you assume or expect faith to be formed in your children? They just assumed, in some cases, that the leaders were doing it. Do you know what other parents are doing to nurture faith in their children? If not, why not? And if so, how do you know that? And it got parents talking to each other so much because often we're blaming them for not having the priorities of getting to faith formation or of showing up to Sunday at Mass because they're at the soccer field, they're at baseball practice, but they've created communities there with those other parents. So we're trying to give them space to do that here. What we've heard in all that listening, at least 40% of the parents said they were very interested in the following topics. First, the top response was discussing tough topics with my children. I don't know how, I don't know where to start, I don't know what to say, I don't know the answers. They wanted some more assistance or accompaniment or support in that. Learning to listen to my child or teen and talk with them about things that matter to them without judging, giving advice, telling them what to do. Managing screen time and social media, developing strengths and potential of my child, helping them know their own calls and their own gifts. Getting involved with my child in serving people in need. That has come up in every focus group I've done as well. Parents that are like, well, my kid's doing service for confirmation, but I want to start when they're little. I want us to do it together. What does that look like? And pastors loved that they heard that, but that surprised them. Encouraging children and teens to talk about their own questions, their doubts, their faith. Because parents were often like, well, we don't doubt, you have faith. And talking to them that the kids are going to have doubt. And if they can't talk to the parents about it, they'll ask other people questions. They'll get answers, and maybe not the answers that mom and dad would give them. So how can we help parents have faith conversations when they're not always sure about that language themselves? Providing moral and value instruction, teaching my children healthy concepts of right and wrong, and praying together as a family. In the one-on-ones, we heard a desire for support for young moms. Often they were home with their children for the first time when all of their friends were still at work. They felt alone. They weren't sure all the time if what they were doing was right. They didn't know how to pray with a little one. What does that look like? And so in a number of our dioceses across the country that are in this grant work, emerging from that is a huge number of people that are focusing on that 0 to 5. Because it doesn't mean changing everything in the program you have. You could work into that. But it means at 0 to 5, instead of just at baptism, okay, we'll see you when you come back at first grade or a 5-year-old or whatever. It means we can walk with those parents and continue to encourage them in ways that empower them to share their faith from the time that child is born. And it hooks them up with other parents that are also in similar situations. So that has come out as a huge trend with what they heard from the parents and how they're responding to that. The need for young couples who just moved to the area, both working, not knowing anybody, not feeling like they belong, like when we talk belonging. My huge area of growth in the last few years has been this sense of community, being in a church, a parish where that's their charism. And so how do people feel like they belong? Cross-generation, elders and young people, possibility for additional grief and mental health support ministries. At a time coming out of COVID, from the family faith formation perspective, I was like, this is a great time to help connect, to bridge that idea of domestic church and what they experienced during COVID and couldn't be a church, to parish community, the church of the parish, and how when you have both, there's that fullness. Well, at the same time, there was a lot of grief, a lot of pain. And I think we're being called to help heal people in this isolation, in young people's developmental stages, not having that same sense of social identity. And so how do we do that? How do we support that need to identify that grief, that loss? Looking for a variety of prayer experiences, opportunities for parents and young people to serve. The major themes that surfaced, of course, leaders heard how much parents love and have concern for their children. Leaders were most often surprised at the level of faith expressed by parents. Because they thought faith formation wasn't a priority, they questioned somebody's faith. These parents' faith was deep. They're being countercultural, just showing up to our churches. Their friends have already said, why are you still there? If they're there, they're being countercultural. So how do we support that? How do we help them express that faith? They lived that in all kinds of ways at home, traditions and practices and prayer and blessing their children. Leaders heard the need for support and encouragement in those early years all the way through teens. And they all needed accompaniment, but through a variety of articulated needs. So how does listening change everything? Well, we've been working with a design process, and this is a simplified version. Ours has like 9 steps. But design strategy period starts with empathy. You empathize with the person that you are designing for, and that means listening. Then you go into defining, what are you being called to? What is it going to look like? And that ideating, that's the brainstorming, that's all the sticky notes with John and the teams. Prototyping and testing. And what's been fun about Lily Grant work is that it's all about experimenting, piloting, trying. It doesn't have to be perfect. And sharing with the community, this is what we heard, this is how we're responding. It might be a little messy to start with, but we're gonna learn together. And families appreciate that authenticity. So how has this affected? Well, one parish is coming at it from multiple directions. They know that parents wanted specific help and general help to raising their children in faith. So they're starting with some family events, but they're also building in with the ministries around the community, how the baptism ministry works with the children, how the junior women's club supports moms, so that they can create a network of support for those families. Parent forums, very topical things. Whatever those parents shared, this is what we need more help with. They're having parent forums doing that. Some of them is an ongoing 6-week process, and then they'll take a break. Some of them is once a month. Others have created a parent lounge, so that in between masses, when they're having children ministry going on, they've created a lounge. In the one group I'm thinking of, got a whiteboard, just wrote one question across the top of it, had coffee, bagels, donuts, that kind of thing. Just invited people in, and they expected to facilitate some conversation. But by the time they were done welcoming people and came in, organically conversations were happening all the way around the room about that one question. So then they brought everybody together at one point, surfaced things, how much the parents had enjoyed that time connecting to each other, decided the next week they were just going to do the same, let it be organic, write a different question. Let the parents have ownership. They don't need us to run everything. They're adults. Family ministry connecting to the other ministries across, creating support across. So one's creating a family apostolate where they're working with different ministries. So parents of children that have just been baptized to parents of children that are adults but who aren't practicing the faith, and those parents want to know how they can support. And then giving parents the tools to integrate faith practices into their busy home lives. What does that look like? One example of the parent forums, when we first talked about these topical events, they're like, I can't afford to hire a speaker every month. So what do you do? And I can't be an expert on every bit of this. So they created like libraries of YouTube clips of these experts talking about topics, play a few minutes, and then have the parents talk at tables. Parents are going to learn more in those conversations with other parents. Like, we can give them a nugget, but if you talk with them for an hour and a half, that much they're going to walk away with. You talk with them for a few minutes, or let somebody else do that, and then give them an opportunity to share with each other. sense of belonging, support for one another, answering each other's questions, finding tips on what somebody else did. I hadn't heard until my children were teenagers, because my parents haven't done this. A friend of ours across the street was blessing their children, who were the same age, teenagers, but she had done this since they were born, blessing them anytime they were leaving the door, blessing them in the morning before breakfast, blessing them at night. I'm like, oh, I don't know, this my kids are like, Mom, because we hadn't always done it. But I thought, so parents sharing those things with each other. My favorite line of the Directory for Catechesis is this: the family is a proclamation of faith in that it is the natural place in which faith can be lived in simple and spontaneous manner. This again is that life to faith to life. We have heard for decades that parents matter most. And that happens through the two things that have the greatest impact: God talk and faith practice. And if we listen to that line, this is exactly it. So good listening is going to help us know what parents need and how we can support them. And it's going to be in ways they can live it at home the best. So my invitation to you, after this last quote. So my friend, we have another friend that's in Vibrant Faith as a coach. He's a Lutheran pastor, has spoken many times on holy listening. I invited him to do a presentation for NCCL when we did it virtual years ago during COVID. So you might remember the name. But he quotes this Douglas Steer: to listen another's soul into a condition of disclosure and discovery may be almost the greatest service that any human being can ever perform for another. And Eric asks then, today, could our greatest service in ministry be listening? Could our greatest service in ministry be listening? So what does all of this mean for you? The churches that are transforming their ministry in these grant programs are not doing it with bigger budgets. We're not giving them any money. They're not doing it with flashier programs, better curriculum, none of that. They are doing it by pulling up a chair and saying, tell me your story. The invitation I leave with you is go home, not next quarter, not next year, next week. Invite 3 parents to have a conversation. Not the ones you see at everything. You can have those conversations, but the ones that are marginally attached. The ones that avoid you in the hallway. The ones that are in the parking lot, so if you were like me, you go out the other door, so you didn't have to do that before my pastor taught me. Talk to those caregivers, buy them a cup of coffee and ask them, what is the hardest part of raising your children in the faith right now? And then don't solve it, don't tell them what to do, just listen. You can email me there, or my website is familieslivingfaith.com, and there's more information on those processes and other kind of models of family faith formation.
So I'm just going to share with you best practices for faith formation with Hispanic families. My name is Carla Ferrando-Bowling. I'm the NCCL consultant for the parents and families at the Center of the Faith. I'm the Spanish cohort for the Diocese of Phoenix. And Denise is the English cohort for the same diocese and San Jose. And the English cohort is Jane Mondoy from Hawaii. So we're connected on that way. I'm also the Hispanic Federation for Family Life chair. The Hispanic Federation for Family Life Ministry belongs to is part of the Catholic Family Life Association. And I'm the director also of the Office for Marriage and Family Life for the Diocese of Green Bay in Wisconsin. And all this by the grace of God, because otherwise I don't know how to achieve all that. On a personal note, I've been married with my husband, Sean. I'm Peruvian, Italian. My husband is from Cincinnati, Ohio. He claims that the best chili comes from Cincinnati. I don't know about that. But it's important that we are together in this ministry, and that also gives me that perspective of the multicultural, multi-ethnic challenges that we have. So my first question is, have you heard about encuentro? How many encuentros have we had? Any 5? Okay, very good. What is encuentro first, for those who are not aware about that? So the main objective of the process of encuentro was to discern the way in which the church in the United States responds to the Hispanic Latino presence, and to strengthen the way in which Hispanic Latinos respond as a church. And I'm just gonna give you a brief summary. So the first encuentro started in 1972, and in this encuentro, we were allowed to gain visibility and to express our needs, aspirations, and contributions as baptized persons and members of the church in the United States. The next one, the second encuentro, came in 1977, where we identified ourselves as a community of Hispanic Catholics that is diverse, yet unified by a common faith, history, culture, and language. And the third encuentro, 1985, allowed us to articulate a clear direction of the church's response to the Hispanic presence and our response as an integral part of that church. The fourth encuentro in the year 2000 allowed us to host and share the experience of encuentro with all of the cultures and races that make up the church in the United States. Unity in diversity. It's interesting because in the previous presentation they were asking me, what about the other different ethnic groups and how are we connected and represented? And the quinto encuentro, the fifth encuentro, started in 2015 and ends in 2019, and encourage us to continue our walk as a God's people to raise our prophetic voices and to discern pastoral priorities and strategies that are most appropriate to the present time. In 2018 was the national convocation of Quinto Encuentro in Dallas, Texas, with 3,500 Hispanic leaders. In 2019, Fifth Encuentro published the concluding document and post-gatherings. Information and all that is available on Quinto Encuentro website. So Missionary Disciples Going Forward with Joy is the national plan for Hispanic Latino ministry. The first national plan was approved in 1987, which established a new vision for Hispanic ministry. So we have to wait 36 years in order to receive the new pastoral framework. On June 16, 2023, the USCCB approved the National Pastoral Plan for Hispanic Latino ministry. So Catholics, Hispanics at a glance, according to the national statistics from Fifth Encuentro, 13,450,000 are immigrant Hispanic Catholics, 60,600,000 are Hispanic Catholics born in the US, which means 40% of the Catholic in the USA are Hispanic Latinos. What is the face of the Hispanic families? The strength of Hispanic marriages and families is deeply rooted in their Catholic faith, which is part of their identity and who they are. The richness of the Hispanic community has been present in the US for more than 500 years. We have witnessed how Hispanic communities have reinvigorated the life and mission of thousands of parishes. What are the gift and blessing of Hispanic Catholic families? It's a profound faith in God's providence, an appreciation of life as a gift from God, the love for the family, a sense of community, an authentic Marian devotion, popular religious devotions and traditions, a sense of hospitality and solidarity, an active participation in ecclesial movement and apostolates. But what are the challenges in the ministry with Hispanic families? Just to name a few, The Catholic environment with no understanding of the faith, meaning they live in a Catholic traditional home, but they don't know about the concept of faith because they haven't been formed. The relationship weakened and due to parents' work schedule, that's very common. They are working 2 shifts in order to make ends meet, and the lack of resources to cope with grief, loss, and loneliness. And we talk about it before too, that there is so much need to heal those wounds in order for us to even approach or try to evangelize them. They have deep wounds of separation, anxiety, and loss. They deal with addictions and domestic violence, fear to deportations due to immigration status. This is more present now with the government measurements, so much so that in some of our ministries, the attendance has decreased considerable because of the fear to being deported. Then we also have the youth disaffiliation that calls for an urgent need for intentional youth ministry. It's interesting because when we have this youth ministry and you go to a parish, they say, oh, we're doing youth ministry and you don't need to teach this, or they don't need to learn in Spanish because they are, already a second generation. But it's such a big challenge because the way that we relate our traditions, they can be Hispanic youth speaking perfect English, but they don't fit with the other community. You have to create the bridges. And that's part of one of the challenges that we have is like that assimilation instead of integration. We want it to be integrated, not assimilated, because we're bringing something important in our traditions and our way of praying. It will be interesting because sometimes you go to Mass and these kids that only speak English, they prefer to go to the Mass in Spanish because that's the language of their heart. That's how they learn the faith and their traditions. And we have also limited resources or poor resources. Or even worse, it's like, well, you need resources in Spanish, and what they give us is, a translation of a document in English, which we appreciate that you're trying to reach to us, but you need to inculturate that content to make it appealing and attractive and appropriate for the Spanish ministry. What are the actions to support Hispanic families? And I'm trying to be brief because I know we have just a few minutes. We need this pastoral company of families, especially those facing challenges, with new and creative forms of evangelization to reach hearts and heal family wounds. Form and equip Hispanic parents to be leaders in the domestic church. The challenges of the contemporary world and the complexities of family life. We also need to help us to preserve the Hispanic family strengths, which are faith traditions, family-centered worldview, acknowledgement of God present in their daily life, and also create awareness of vocation with Hispanic families. We don't talk about too much vocation. I'm also in the marriage and family life ministry, and it's interesting when they have this, let's pray for vocation, and only 2 vocations are mentioned, and the vocation of marriage is sometimes not included. So we have this marriage, priesthood, consecrated life, permanent diaconate, that needs to be taught in age-appropriate ways into faith formation at all levels. We also need to help parents to share faith formation at home, Bible, tradition, witness, rethink the way we organize and do the events in our parish. For the Latino community, quinceañera is a big deal, right? So partner with, one of the things we did in this parish in DC is First of all, the pastor was very open to try to call the youth to be part of a formation. And he said, Carla, we're gonna do quinceañeras. We're gonna do a retreat for quinceañeras, and we're gonna partner with the sisters. There's a convent that is half an hour in Washington, D.C. And what we did is we invite the girls Friday night. They pray the Vespers with the sisters, so they know how, religious life is. And after the Vesper, they just have a pizza and share a pizza. And during that time, they can ask the sister whatever they want. Hey, sister, do you sleep? Go to bed with your veil, or things like that, right? And it was very interesting how they interact. So, and the pastor was not putting kind of obstacles. If you are not confirmed, you cannot be part of the quinceañera. No, you just come, and then we try to evangelize you, but don't try to include them in this group because they want to do that. They want to, this need to belonging to a group, that they are not the only ones. There are other quinceañeras that would like to receive the formation too. Over retreats for grieving parents, ministry with widows and widowers, Nepal's Kana ministry, support for single, separated, or divorced parents, that they don't feel included, offer intergenerational events for family accompaniment. Also, just wrapping up, the Call to the Joy of Love is the document that the National Pastoral Framework for Marriage and Family Life Ministry that was developed by the Committee on Laity, Marriage, Family Life, and Youth on the USCCB and was approved in June 2021. This document is a great resource that presents to you different options and resources to help and support families in different situations, and that includes multicultural families. Like training the parish leaders by providing intercultural competency trainings, educate the parish community about the different cultures represented by the families, encourage Latino families within the parish to share their gifts and cultural heritage with the parish community. What I see in the parish is when we try to integrate, and perhaps I have lived that because my husband is American, I'm Hispanic, and what I see is it's interesting because in the Spanish gathering, he was not welcome. But when we go to the Anglo, I was not welcome. So we have this tension, and we're trying to build bridges. What we did is, for example, our pastor said, well, let's do a Station of the Cross. But now we're gonna do it bilingual. He didn't ask anybody, can we do it? He started one in English, one in Spanish. And we start trying to bring all those communities together in a simple way, because we need to create those bridges to support each other. So, what to do as a parish leaders? 5 responsibility for parish leaders to accompany Hispanic families that I recommend is continually assess the pastoral reality, advocate on behalf of and with the community, coordinate ministry efforts, develop specific resources and programming, and most important, form and train your pastoral leaders. There is so much need of training. Partnering with parents and extended families, help grandparents to better understand their important role. You will be surprised in so many of the Hispanic families, they have received the faith from the grandparents and not from the parents. Because the parents are busy working and they're not at home, so the grandparents are the ones that really passing the faith. Offer a parish-based ministry for grandparents to encourage them in the transmission of faith. Ongoing formation. I'm glad when I hear, this, like what Chandra was sharing, this resource is available in Spanish too, that we have the opportunity to have the same resources. Partner with ecclesial movements, if there is any. I'm surprised, after my time being in the ministry in the United States, how these ecclesial movement are dying or they are not renewing themselves when it's such important resource that they can work together collaborating in the parish. Invite deacons in your faith formation programs. Promote a family retreats and festival at least once a year. These are some resources that I recommend that I've been using in the ministry. There is Catholic Quinceañera Prep. That's one of them with Agape Ministry. The one in the middle is a program for the Archdiocese of Boston, Emmaus Ministry for Grieving Parents. All this is available in Spanish too. Also the awareness of the day for the grandparents and the elderly. That was a great initiative from Pope Francis. Preserve the traditions, and help the Spanish to preserve the traditions. And also resources for leader formation in Spanish I'm happy to report that has been increasingly awareness of the needs. We have CEPI Institute. We have, for example, the University of Navarra in Spain that has online classes so they can be formed. Santa Clara University is the Institute for Hispanic in California, also offers these programs. We also have resources in the Federation for Family Life Ministry with the Catholic Family Life Association. Conclusions, our ministry as parish leader is enriched by our cultural diversity, families that need to be recognized and welcomed. We need to deliver a committed, permanent, and ongoing formation for parish leaders to support families as a visible sign of Christ in the world. Remind our families that they are the domestic church. Parents have a very important role in the formation of their children's faith, but they are not always prepared to undertake and fulfill that responsibility. And seriously consider changing those norms or programs that no longer respond to the contemporary needs of a family or prevent it from assuming its due place as the church of the home. Thank you.